There were no kids on the dirt road I grew up on. My parents' friends had no children, and my little sister wasn't born until I was 9. My dad worked third shift, and my mom had to be at the construction site at 6 a.m. I spent a lot of time in the care of various family friends. We'd wake in the darkness of 5 a.m., make our way to the home of whoever agreed to house me, and I'd wait for my dad to come pick me up at 9. There, in the silence of someone else's home, I'd tell myself stories. My stuffed dog, Cotton Candy, sat droop-eyed on the couch next to my pillow as a captive audience. It was an act of comfort. I'd tell one story after another to break up the quiet dark. I read all the time, devoured book after book, but the first time I penned a story wasn't until I was in 3rd grade. School gave opportunity to write my stories down, and every stickered A++ I got for them stoked the desire to write more. I had a fervent love of reading, and an intrinsic need to tell stories, to imagine, but even then I didn't think of myself as a writer. It changed over time, but trying to imagine a writer created varying and often conflicting images. They had to own a quill with a giant feather, they all wore berets, they only spoke in rhymes, they congregated in coffee shops, they all wrote on typewriters, they were published, they looked like anyone but me. In college, I took a class called The Humanities Through the Arts, and on the first day I sat in the front row and pulled out a notebook. I was editing a poem I'd written earlier when a shadow fell across the page. I looked up, and looming over me was a man about my parents' age, with crow's feet and laugh lines. Even looking down at my notebook, there was something in his eye that suggested he was about to laugh or had thought of a funny joke. Self-consciously, I tucked it closer to me. My apologies. I didn't mean to make you self-conscious. I just wondered what you were working on already. It's only the first day. His face gave way to a grin as he spoke. Oh, it's just this thing. There's a competition showcase coming up, and I'm working on my submission. I nervously picked at the corner of the page while I explained. Oh, a thing. Are you a writer then? He was clearly teasing. No, I'm not. It's just something I'm doing, I stumbled out. I was 16 years old in the early college program. I was bullied in high school. I tried not to draw attention to myself in college classes. Not a writer. Do you prefer poet? I shook my head, and at this he peered over his glasses at me. May I read what you've got? I didn't know what to do, but instinctively I slid the notebook to him. He read silently with his finger sliding along the lines as he went. When he finished, he looked at me consideringly. Not a writer and not a poet, then what would you call this? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, it is a poem, but I'm not a poet, I said, huffing out a laugh. Do you write other things? He asked. I've written a couple short stories, but nothing any good, I shrugged. He nodded like I confirmed his suspicion and walked to the front of the room. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Humanities Through the Arts. I have an interesting question for all of you. Show of hands. How many of you consider yourselves writers? He addressed everyone, and I slid down into my seat. I felt like I'd stepped into a trap of some sort. I didn't raise my hand. Apparently no one else did. I thought so. How many of you write? Short stories, poetry, fan fiction, or slash fiction? He asked the class again. This time I raised my hand with a good number of others. Isn't it so interesting that none of you raised your hands when asked if you were a writer, and yet you all are? He looked right at me and asked, Do you write? Yes, I replied. Then you are a writer, my dear. Simple as that.